Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast, a place where industry experts discuss how technology is impacting our life, our work, while also transforming entire industries and even the world. Every day, I'm going to be serving you a daily dose of optimism and motivation while highlighting along the way that technology really does work best when it brings people together. And today, I want to explore how technology could transform the healthcare industry in ways we could only previously dream of. Because a company called Epic recently appeared on my tech radar, and they currently manage electronic health records for more than 250 million patients. And they appeared on my radar after expanding clinical trials by kicking off a life sciences program to help speed up the development of new therapies. And providers around the world are all using Epic to conduct more than 100,000 active research studies with more than 4.7 million patients. And I think this is so important because today many clinical trials struggle to find the right participants. And the first stage of life sciences is aimed at accurately matching organisations with clinical trials suited to their patients. And hopefully this is going to allow researchers to be able to recruit more effectively and help ensure that clinical trials benefit more representative populations. So I've invited Dave Little and Phil Lindemann to join me on the podcast today in a conversation about the importance of companies providing data for the greater good and how large data sets like Epic's Cosmos can actually provide health officials with the data needed to enact changes, ultimately allowing doctors to learn from thousands of other hospitals rather than working in silos. And we'll also talk about other trends in healthcare and outbreak detection and so much more. So buckle up and hold on tight because I'm going to beam your ears all the way to Wisconsin, where Dave and Phil are waiting to join us today. So a massive warm welcome to the show, guys. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Dave Little. I am a physician by training, family physician, and I work now for Epic, the electronic health record developer in Madison, Wisconsin. And so my roles are, I tell people I have two jobs. One is to help software programmers to understand physicians, and the other is to help physicians understand software. Within that, I get to play a part in the Epic research team that explores the data that we have available to us and helps us discover new insights related to healthcare. And that's probably the most fun part of my job.
Awesome. And of course, we've got not one, but two guests for everyone's listening pleasure today. So Phil, could you tell everyone listening a little about you too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with Dave on our informatics team here. My focus is on all things data and analytics. So we make several software applications for healthcare delivery, for diagnostic laboratories, and all of them generate massive amounts of data that we have to figure out how to organize, do data quality on, do data governance, and then serve that back up to users, either back within our applications or other parts of stakeholders that might be outside of the organization. They might be individuals inside the organization, but don't use Epic on a daily basis. So it was a job that years ago when I was on the applications that generated data, I would be like, why is it so hard to get a report? Why is this so difficult? And now I've spent the last several years on the other side of that fence saying, wow, this is challenging, managing data and making sure that it's accurate and the question they asked is actually what we're answering and those types of things. So focus on that, as well as how that then flows into a research capacity. A big part of my focus is something called Cosmos, which is a collaboration that we created with the Epic healthcare community that has about 176 million unique patients that they can use for research and discovery. That's my job.
Well, there's so much I'm looking forward to talking with you both about today because Epic is known for managing the electronic health records for more than 250 million patients. And on this podcast every day, I try and demystify how technology is transforming different spaces, different industries, etc. And I'm conscious we will have an international audience that could be hearing about Epic for the very first time. So could you tell me a little bit more about what Epic is and the role that technology is playing in your business?
Sure. Epic is a comprehensive computerized medical record system. And when I say comprehensive, as Phil mentioned, we aspire to be one single database that serves all the needs of the patients and the healthcare systems. So your office notes, if you go to the hospital, your hospital notes, emergency room notes, all of your lab results, imaging results, as well as the ability of the patient to access those results through the patient portal. We provide the patient interface, as well as scheduling and billing and the administrative things that occur in the background, and the reporting and the quality data that organizations monitor to ensure that their patient care outcomes are meeting expectations and that their financial outcomes are meeting expectations. Got to keep the lights on. So we strive to integrate all of those functions into a single database that will serve all of the interested folks that have a stake in the game.
Yeah, you can, for some of your additional audience, another way to think about it is essentially we are the operating system for a healthcare delivery system. And where historically in other industries, you might think of the ERP system as sort of that primary system in healthcare delivery, the EHR sort of is that primary system. And we want to make sure that we're, as Dave said, developing the most integrated patient-centered system that we can.
And before you came on the podcast today, I recently read that providers across the world use Epic to conduct more than 100,000 active research studies with 4.7 million patients. So just to bring everything to life that we're talking about here, do you have a use case of how technology is transforming your work here?
Yeah, I think so. The little backstory here is that we at Epic really focused on doing, and this is one of our principles, generalizable development. So when you have 60 different teams, guess what? A lot of them start developing a feature that is very transferable to other domains. So when we develop a feature or a function, we make it generalizable. And when we were early on in developing the EHR, that ability to be very generalizable was very appealing to academic medical centers who had lots of unique workflows and flexibility. So they had lots of different things that the way we built the system, they were able to configure it. And now fast forward, at this point, multiple decades, most of the large academic medical centers in the United States run Epic, and increasingly internationally. So we have sites in 15 other countries, not all of them academic nature, but those sites are the ones that also run the clinical trials. And there is something very powerful, going back to Dave's point about integration, this idea that when a patient is with their provider, with their doctor, that is a trusted place to have an interaction about participating in research. So we had these sites that did a lot of research, and then building an integrated system, we were able to integrate some research functions into the workflow. And what I mean by that is, for example, Cleveland Clinic published on this quite a few years ago now, where there was basically an opportunity for patients to participate in a clinical trial. And rather than doing things on Facebook or flyers in the bathroom at the pub and things like that, instead, you can have something directly in that physician workflow in the exam room that says this patient is eligible for a research trial, and you could ask them if they're interested. And the whole goal is that this happened in an integrated fashion directly in the workflow with their physician, who they trust. And that is, where the power of sort of what we're doing with research integration and research trials is bringing that into the exam room and wiring it together directly with clinical and research care in one system.
And on that same topic, I'd love to maybe take a break from the technology aspect for a moment and just learn a little bit more about the problems that you're solving. And for anyone listening that's outside of the industry, can you tell me a little bit more about the challenges around things like clinical trials that are struggling to find the right participants? Because that's where it all begins, right?
Yeah. So finding patients for clinical trials is very difficult. So not only do you have to first identify that they're out there, but then you have to keep them in the trial, and you have to make sure that you have the right engagement strategies and techniques to keep them in there. So just finding the patients are difficult. Unfortunately, what has happened over time is you have not been able to get a representative sample of the population that participates in clinical trials. They are a lot of white male patients. Like that is the reality. It is heavily skewed towards that. So being able to have a representative sample for clinical trials is a very, very powerful thing. But if you go back to my first point, it's really difficult to find them at all. So what we like to do is, Epic is not only in the academic medical centers, but we're also in what we'd call in the United States a critical access hospital. These are, small hospitals that are serving a very rural population. They only have a couple beds. So that's kind of your extremes. You have these 1,000-bed hospitals and 4-bed hospitals, and then everything in between. And what you end up doing is you cover all geographies, and in this case, the United States. And by that, we are able to get a more representative sample of patients that are able to engage in clinical trials. So the touch points are all of the healthcare delivery locations, whether that's a clinic or a hospital, but we're not just skewed towards one end or the other. We're able to have this representative population and then use those direct in the office enrollment tools. So we're not having, people still do the ads, and those are other options. But as far as bang for buck, as we would say, you're going to be much more productive doing something that's attached to the healthcare system, whether that's alerting them in their mobile app, which Dave mentioned before, we call MyChart, or doing something directly in the office. So it's that idea of recruiting these patients is one of the hardest things, and you'll actually see there's an entire cottage industry around this. There are literally, hundreds of companies that their goal is, we're going to find you the right patients for clinical trials. And our approach to that is those patients are already in the community that we work with. We just have to help them get connected with their physician, who can connect them with the research department. So it sounds simple, but it's incredibly difficult when you see it in real life of how the enrollment process works today. And then on the financial side of that, this is extremely costly. So in a couple of weeks, and again, this is in the US, a drug, Humira, which is a rheumatoid arthritis drug made by AbbVie. This is considered one of the largest economic events in pharmaceutical history when this drug goes off patent. So the point is, when a drug gets patented, they run the clinical trials on it. That could take a couple of years. And then that gives them 10 years of exclusivity where they're able to actually make that drug available to the community until the patent runs out. And then other companies will make similar medications. So that time period, the more that you can get that drug available to the market is very valuable to the companies paying for these trials, the sponsors. So there is sort of some economics that the faster you can enroll patients, the faster that you can understand if the drug worked, and the faster you can get it to market, there is some economics that they're able to sell that drug longer, which, understand that there's some uniqueness to the U.S. market there and how our economy functions, but that's a very big portion of how they're approaching the problem.
And I read before you came on again that challenge, or those sets of challenges, actually led to you expanding clinical trials by kicking off a life science program that would actually help speed up the development of new therapies and address some of those challenges. Can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind that? Because I feel that there is a story there too, right? Yeah.
So pretty much everything that we've done started with the patient and then logically expanded out. So we started with an ambulatory medical record. Well, Patients also go to the hospital. So let's do a hospital record. And those are now integrated. And then patients we knew had an opportunity to be recruited for clinical trials. So let's build some of these recruitment tools. And that's where that 100,000 studies, 4.7 million patients are. Then we said, okay, what's the next concentric circle here? Well, it's once the patient's enrolled in the study, there's all these different elements that need to essentially be built into an electronic system to conduct the study. So these are things like questionnaires that would come on a phone that the patient's going to answer periodically. They're basically going to have a diary for the trial. There's going to be consent forms that they need to sign. There's going to be different protocols and things that are built. And these take our healthcare customers a while to build out. So the idea behind the life sciences platform was, what if we could build something once and then distribute it across the community who wants to run that clinical trial? Where it's built once, it's built correctly, it's built with the same definitions. So part of the life sciences platform is when it's time to actually stand up a trial at a site, let's see if we can do that in the most turnkey way possible from an IT perspective. So the platform is going to allow sponsors, so the pharmaceutical company, the device company, essentially the people with the new device or therapeutic, they're going to be able to build out all those elements and then push them to the site so they can download them. So we really think that'll be revolutionary. That function does not exist today. So we're really excited about that, but it does take some time to actually code this, develop it. I'm heading out to one of our large academic sites today to talk through this with them and understand, where should we start? What are the most important things to work on? What are things we can leave on the back burner for a while so we can stay really focused and get something available in the coming year?
So for everyone listening there, we've talked about the challenge, we've talked about the technology, but how does the life science program work? Could you possibly walk me through it and how it would work in anybody's listening world, really?
Yeah. So the idea here is there is a community of sponsors. So the individuals making the therapeutic or the diagnostic, and then there are sites. And of course, the patients and individuals that are participating in the trial. And what we're doing is we are creating a network across those sponsors and sites that they will sort of have some agreed upon standards so that when they want to run a trial, they will be able to basically the sponsor will be able to contact a site, say, would you like to run a trial? There's a lot more complexity that goes with this. I'm sort of broad brushstrokes is the sponsor first has to find these sites that they trust to run the trial reliably. So we're building tools that will help that connection. But the first thing is we actually need to build the network of people. So we have built a network called Clinical Trials Matchmaking, where a site will say, I'd like to participate with this. And that sort of, makes them available to a sponsor to see them and say, this is a site that's interested in conducting trials, and we are facilitating a way to easily contact them and understand some more information about that site so they can go to them and get the trial up and running. So there's obviously a technology layer here that's connecting things, but a lot of this is getting these groups that have worked together. But it's, we were listening to a talk one time and they said, well, basically every time you do a clinical trial, it's like building a football stadium and then taking it down and then building it again and taking it down. So it's just this enormous amount of effort where every time they refigure out legal documents, they refigure out things that don't need to be refigured out every single time. So part of what this is doing is getting the people and the process also streamlined so that when it does time to turn on the trial, the technical piece is also there. So it's a combination of things that we're going to need to do and work with both our existing community and this new sponsor community that we're currently engaging.
And if we were to zoom out just for a moment, can you tell me more about the importance of sharing large data sets like these for doctors to learn from thousands of other hospitals and support research health needs like adverse trends in healthcare and outbreak detection, etc.? Because that is the bigger picture, right?
That is so important to doctors because doctors face dozens or hundreds of decisions they have to make every day with every patient. And the challenge is to find the best source of information to inform those decisions. Sometimes that can be a clinical trial that takes place over weeks or months or years that very carefully evaluates and compares the effectiveness of interventions. In other cases, it can be a much more immediate need, like we have just seen the past 3 years with COVID. When COVID hit, it was so pervasive and it impacted so many people so quickly that we didn't have time to do a randomized controlled trial of a half a dozen different treatment options to determine which one was the best. People needed to make those decisions in real time, and as those decisions were being made, we were sort of building the plane while it was in flight. And this is where the power of having that data accessible to physicians quickly became so important, because in the Cosmos database, we have 170 million patients, and we can see the numbers of patients who are getting COVID and the treatments that they're being given and the outcomes that are associated with that, and quickly compile and communicate those results in ways that will help guide those decisions that have to be made in the moment. And some of those decisions are, here's a question that the data is not clear on. We need to design a study to look at this in more detail over time. And certainly the traditional research process is very important, and it's not going to go away because of a database like Cosmos. But if anything, our ability to identify those questions and the patients who are eligible for those trials will be enhanced because of the availability of big databases like the Cosmos.
And I agree with everything both of you are saying here. I'm curious, though, is there still an element of resistance in the industry, especially around sharing things like data sets? What are your biggest challenges around this? Because I would imagine that's one of the biggest areas of contention for you guys.
Yeah, and I think that's true on a number of levels.
Yeah.
The first level is the patient level. Because when you talk about data that's being shared and my health information is in this computer and other people can see it, and there is a lot of concern about that, and rightfully so. When we enter data into the Cosmos database, it is de-identified and completely removed from the ability to identify any given patient. And so we make every precaution to protect that. We work with a lot of organizations from a lot of different parts of the country and around the world who are, very proud of their academic traditions, and sometimes, getting folks to work together can be a challenge. Research is inherently competitive, and everybody wants to be the first one to get to a discovery, and everybody wants to be the one to get the grant and the one to make the discovery, and it does take some group dynamics and cooperation to get all of these interests working together to move forward, and some folks are more eager to do that than others, and so that's also a challenge at the organizational level as well as the patient level. The privilege and the power of having everything in a single common database from these organizations is that it enables organizations to talk to each other and send records back and forth. Both at the patient level and at the research level. We have a application called Care Everywhere. Phil's headed off to some conference somewhere out of town, I assume, and if he develops a health issue while he is in another town, he can go to the local hospital and they will have access to his medical records here back in Madison and facilitate providing that care, as well as sharing that data through those tunnels for research as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I showed up at Addenbrooke's in Cambridge, they would be able to pull my record from here in Madison, Wisconsin. So about 11 million times a day, a patient record gets transferred from some system to Epic. So half of them are not Epic systems that are either receiving or sending those records. So from an interoperability standpoint, I think there is a success story here. It's working and it's happening a lot. So it's important to not conflate interoperability, which is the need for data for patient care. And I think we've just seen that grow exponentially. And then there's data portability, which is more of people are trying to put data together in a big pile for particular needs. And I think that's been also going on for years and years and years. However, it's a much broader scope and set of use cases. It's not, I need this for immediate patient care. It's, I want to put a set of data together to help oncology research, or I want to do something to study patient outcomes. So there's a lot more desire to build these focused data sets. Our approach with Cosmos was, if you look at a Epic system anywhere in the world, there's about 170,000 unique data elements, and we've standardized that across all of our sites. So even if you go to an NHS site, some of the items might be turned off or on, depending on what they do regionally, but they're all there in the database. So that allowed us to aggregate data at a much easier way, because we know the med field and the allergy field is going to be in the same spot no matter where we go in the world. And then we're just bringing those together and standardizing them in that aggregate data set that can be used for research and discovery. And there's a lot of initiatives like that. And I think really where the power comes in is, what are you going to do with that data set? It's kind of, you hear data is the new oil. It's almost like data is a rare earth mineral. Like, just like there's data that is very, very useful for particular things, and there's data that's useful for other things. It's not just sort of, oh, now we have data, we can solve all these things. So it's translating the type of data you have into the use case that it can facilitate. And sometimes that's building entire technology applications, and sometimes that is research that is going to move the field forward.
So if we take everything that we've talked about today, could I ask that you paint a picture of how you see technology transforming this space in, let's say, another 5 years from now, just to give people listening an understanding of where we are now and a vision of where we're heading?
I think the direction that this is heading is what we would call the learning health system, where the data is actually being tracked, and the outcomes are being tracked, and the information being fed back into the system in real time, so that the system is teaching itself. So that when that patient comes in with COVID, and the system knows to look at the last 100 patients that came in with COVID and see which patients got what treatments and which patients have the best outcomes, and process that information and feed that back to the physician in real time, so that I'm not just hearing, what's the latest CDC recommendation, but I'm hearing, what does the data show us based on what we did this week with our patients, and which ones are having the best outcomes. So that excites me a great deal. And we have an app that we're developing called Best Care for My Patient, and I'll let Phil provide the technical details around that, since he's the expert. But this is the thing that is really driving me and got me worked up about how cool medicine's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. So Phil, I'll throw it over to you to expand on that.
Yeah. So I guess I'll answer that in two parts. First, from a patient perspective and how technology will help them. Our goal is that every patient who wants to or needs to be in a clinical trial, that's going to be a very, very easy process. And today, it's a lot of hunting around. It's looking at many different sources of varying quality. Our goal is that when a trial is the right thing for you, that is going to be standard of care. That's going to be the next thing in line and have that embedded. From a physician's point of view, really, we're at this point where a physician today who has Cosmos has access to more data more easily, more quickly than on the history of Earth. And the idea that they can have millions and millions of physicians' decisions recorded and basically at their fingertips in the exam room is the goal of Best Care. So Best Care is a application that we're building into our medical record that leverages data and insights from this Cosmos data set, but it basically delivers a precision cohort to the patient that's in front of you in the office right now. And you might be deciding, should I put this patient on med A, med B? Should we do surgery, or should we just watch and wait? And the goal of Best Care is to use a cohort of patients like the one in front of you and look at historically what happened. And that's one more data point that physician can then use to provide personalized medicine to that patient in front of them right now. So that's the goal of Best Care. We could probably talk a whole session about that, but it's those types of tools that we see putting in physicians' hands as the true power of bringing these data sets together. It's great to bring data sets together. That's extremely hard to do, but what do you build with it? What do you make with it is going to be where the real power in technology is going forward.
100% with you on that. And I've loved chatting with you both today. And you've both had phenomenal achievements in your field. But of course, none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help along the way. So to finish the podcast today, I'm going to ask you both, is that a person that you're truly grateful towards who maybe helped you get where you are, maybe saw something in you and invested a little time in you both? Who would that person be? And there's a little story behind that. And Dave, I'll let you answer first.
Okay. Yeah, this is another one that I could talk about for a whole half hour. Because I would give credit to my father for everything that he exemplified and instilled in me. And the things that my father did that were most inspiring, really three things. Number one, he had the most active, engaged mind. In every situation, he wanted to learn, he wanted to discover, he wanted to understand, everything about the world around him in every situation. And he would never just take something for granted or accept something without really examining it. He was a very, very hard worker, just always putting forth his best effort in every situation. And he really treated people genuinely well. He was, just as kind and considerate to, his bosses and his authority figures as he was to the people who waited on us in the restaurants. And it didn't matter what your lot in life was or what your role was. Everybody got treated equally well. And that, was an ethic that took me into the healthcare field and the ability to interact with patients and engage with patients, and at the same time always exploring and always wanting to know more and learn more. And that's kind of his intellectual drive is what took me from being just a everyday family doc on the corner to somebody interested in technology and big data and how can we take the healthcare profession to the next level? So all the credit in the world to Dad. I miss you, Dad. And I love you and you're my inspiration. And thank you for giving me a moment to talk about that.
Oh, what a beautiful answer. What a huge influence he's had throughout your life and helped shape you and the man you are today. And Phil, it's a tough act to follow.
That, that.
I know. I'll have to roll it up even higher. So for your listeners that might not know, Wisconsin is the cheese capital of the United States. And true to form, my family is cheesemakers. So I grew up in a family business. And growing up in a family business, you can't just quit the job because you don't like it, right? It is part of you. It is every product that you build. It's a representative. It's representative of who you are. So you have to care about it. It has to be a quality product. So that sort of taught me how to care about the work that I'm doing, but it also meant that you had to sort of figure everything out. We didn't get to just have an IT person or an accountant. You did everything. And when they were, building out production lines for manufacturing and things like that, they built a lot of the machinery themselves. And that's really where my sort of technical interest grew, is watching them just say, in most cases, this wasn't with a college education. They're just like, we're going to figure this out, right? We're going to look it up, or we're going to go talk to a friend. And basically this idea that you could solve anything and you just had to go and put your mind to it was very influential on me and growing up. So I'll say the family business is the biggest inspiration to me.
Well, two great answers. Now, before I let you go, we've covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time today. For anyone wanting to find out more information about Epic, ask your team a question, or just find out more information about anything we talked about today, what's the best starting point for everything?
I would point people to our website called epicresearch.org. And that is where Epic posts the findings of our studies that we do internally, looking at the data that we have available to us. And that is publicly accessible. It doesn't require a membership fee or a login or anything. It also has the opportunity for you to submit ideas. If you have a question and you think it would be something cool to explore, you can submit your ideas there. And from the front page, you can subscribe to Epic, and it will send you the notifications of the things that we have done, both internally and in collaboration with our academic partners. The studies that we have been able to produce, and I think that would give the reader a flavor of the types of science that is available to us within the database.
An attack on cosmos.epic.com. That'll be the current size of the data set and all of the organizations that participate in it. So if you are interested in, size of the data and who's out there and who you could work with using it, that's a good place, cosmos.epic.com.
Awesome. I'll add both those links to the show notes so people can find everything nice and easily. So much I loved about chatting with you today. I always say in every episode, technology works best when it brings people together. And from the outside, Epic manages electronic health records for more than 250 million patients. You're expanding clinical trials by kicking off the life science program and help speed up development of new therapies. Provided across the world are using Epic on a more 100,000 active research studies with 4.7 million patients. And it's all the technology that makes that happen. But you said something quite early in the episode there, and that was it all starts with a patient. And I think that really comes across in everything that you talked about today. So just a big thank you for taking the time and sharing that story with me. Thank you for the invitation. For me, I think today's conversation was so important. Every single person listening here will have a health record. There's a deluge of data on almost every aspect of our lives, and whether it be doctor surgeries and hospitals, they all have data that would be critical to solving some of the biggest healthcare issues in the world. And it does make me wonder if everyone was able to pool information and work together, collaborate to improve the healthcare of patients all around the world. That's got to be a great thing. And yes, there are a few things like privacy, regulation, and a lot of obstacles to get over. But ultimately, using technology to improve the lives of patients, that is what we're talking about here. And I'm interested in where this leads. And I'm also interested in your thoughts on this. I suspect everyone will have a completely different take on this. And that's another conversation that we need to be having too, and how we approach this in a responsible manner. So please, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @NeilCHughes. Let me know your thoughts. If you want to come on here and have a conversation with me about a different element of this, happily do that too. But that's it for today. So thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.